A New Life in London. Part 1. The Decision. I am Adam. I'm 25 years old, and I come from a small city by the sea. Every morning I used to sit on the balcony and watch the sun rise over the water. The waves were calm, the streets were quiet, and life felt simple, almost too simple. Since I was a teenager, I dreamed of living abroad. I wanted to see new cities, meet people from around the world, and start a new life. But dreaming is easy. Taking action is the hard part.
For years I told my friends, one day I'll travel, but that day never came. I always found a reason to wait. Not enough money, not enough courage, or maybe just fear of change. One evening I was sitting with my mother. She looked at me and said quietly, "Adam, if you really want this, don't wait. You're young, and life won't wait for you." That night I couldn't sleep. Her words stayed in my mind like a song I couldn't turn off. Life won't wait for you. Maybe it was time to stop waiting. The next morning, I opened my laptop and started searching. How to study in London. Jobs for international students. Life in the UK. Every click made the dream feel closer, more real. Weeks passed. I filled out forms, sent emails, and waited until one morning I received an email that changed everything. It was from a language school in London. "Congratulations, Adam, you've been accepted."
I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't stop smiling. That was it. The dream was finally real. That evening, I told my parents. My mother smiled with tears in her eyes. My father stayed quiet for a moment, then said, "Go, son. Find your path. We'll always be here for you." The night before my flight, I packed my suitcase carefully. Every item had a memory, a photo, a book, a lucky keychain. Before sleeping, I looked around my room one last time. Tomorrow, everything would change.
Part 2. The Journey. The morning of my flight arrived faster than I expected. The sun had barely risen when my father helped me carry my suitcase to the car. The city was still half asleep, quiet and calm. I could hear the sound of birds and my own heartbeat. At the airport, everything felt unreal. The people rushing, the announcements echoing through the halls, and the sight of planes taking off one after another. I checked in my luggage and looked at my ticket again. London, one way. I said goodbye to my parents at the gate. My mother hugged me tightly and whispered, "Take care of yourself and never forget who you are." My father smiled, though I could see the sadness in his eyes. He said softly, "Make us proud, son." When I walked away, my hands were shaking. I didn't want to look back because I knew I might not be able to leave. The moment I stepped onto the plane, I felt like I was stepping into a new version of my life. The flight was long, almost 7 hours. I sat by the window, watching the clouds move like waves. I thought about everything I was leaving behind. My friends, my room, the streets I knew by heart. But then I imagined what was waiting for me. New faces, new words, a new world. The woman sitting next to me smiled and asked, "Is this your first time going abroad?" I said, "Yes." She smiled kindly. "You'll love London. It's busy, loud, and full of stories." Her words stayed with me. I tried to rest, but my mind was wide awake. Between excitement and fear, time passed strangely. I opened my small notebook and wrote, "Today I leave everything I know behind. Tomorrow I start again." Hours later, the pilot's voice came over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now approaching London Heathrow Airport." I looked out the window. The clouds opened, and there it was, a city of lights, grey skies, and endless roads. My heart started to race. This was it. The dream was no longer a dream. As the plane began to descend, I whispered to myself, "Here we go, Adam, a new life in London."
Part 3. The Arrival. When the plane doors opened, a wave of cold air touched my face. It was colder than I expected. Everyone around me stood up, stretching, grabbing their bags. I followed the crowd through the narrow hallway that led into Heathrow Airport. Inside, everything felt huge. Bright lights, big signs, and voices speaking English everywhere. For a moment, I just stood still, watching people move like a river. That's when it hit me. I was really in London. I followed the signs that said passport control and waited in a long line. When it was my turn, a polite officer asked, "Purpose of visit?" "Study and work," I said. He looked at my papers, stamped my passport, and smiled. "Welcome to the United Kingdom." Those words felt powerful. They were more than just a greeting. They were the beginning of everything new. I collected my suitcase, checked my phone, and walked toward the exit. Outside, the sky was grey, and soft rain was falling again. A man in a yellow jacket shouted, "Taxi! Need a taxi?" I nodded and followed him to a black cab. The driver, a middle-aged man with a kind face, said, "Where to, mate?" "To central London, please," I answered. As we drove away from the airport, I looked out the window. Everything outside was new. The cars, the buildings, even the color of the sky. Red buses passed by. People walked quickly with umbrellas, and streetlights reflected on the wet road. The driver noticed me staring and said, "First time in London, huh?" "Yes," I said, smiling. "Well, mate," he laughed, "you'll get used to the rain. Everyone does." It took about 40 minutes to reach my hotel. It was a small place near Paddington, nothing fancy, but clean and warm. I checked in, carried my bags upstairs, and sat on the edge of the bed. Outside, I could hear cars, sirens, and the soft hum of the city. I opened the window and looked outside. The city lights were shining through the mist. Somewhere far away, a man was playing the saxophone on the street. The sound echoed softly between the buildings. It was beautiful. Lonely, but beautiful. I took out my notebook and wrote, "Day 1, I made it. The city feels big, cold, and strange, but maybe soon it will start to feel like home." I turned off the light, lay down, and listened to the rain tapping on the window. That sound became my lullaby, and I fell asleep. I whispered to myself, "Tomorrow I'll explore this new world."
The next morning, I woke up early. For a moment, I forgot where I was. The room was quiet, and outside I could hear the sound of buses and birds. Then I remembered. I was in London. My new life had already begun. I opened the curtain and saw the city waking up. The sky was grey, but the streets were alive. People were walking fast, holding coffee cups, umbrellas, and newspapers. Red buses moved like blood through the veins of the city. I washed my face, got dressed, and looked at myself in the mirror. I still looked tired, but there was something new in my eyes, a mix of fear and excitement. I left the hotel with my small notebook in my pocket. The air was cold, but it felt good. I decided to walk and explore the streets around me. Every building, every sign, every voice felt different. After 10 minutes, I found a small cafe called The Morning Cup. It looked warm and friendly. Wooden tables, big windows, and the smell of fresh bread and coffee. I pushed the door and went inside. "Good morning, love. What can I get you?" The lady behind the counter smiled brightly. Her accent was pure British, soft and musical. "Good morning," I said. "1 black coffee, please." "Sure, darling. Anything to eat?" Maybe a croissant, please." I sat by the window, watching the street outside. People passed by quickly, students, workers, mothers with kids. It felt like I was watching a movie. London was alive, busy, and beautiful.
When the lady brought my coffee, she asked. First time in London? Yes, I said, smiling. Well then, welcome, love. London's a bit crazy, but you'll get used to it. I laughed. I hope so. After breakfast, I opened my notebook and wrote new English words. Receipt, queue, ticket, cheers, excuse me, sorry, please. I repeated them quietly to myself, trying to sound more British each time. When I left the cafe, the sun had come out for a short visit. The streets sparkled with light reflected on the wet ground. I took a deep breath and smiled. For the first time, London didn't feel like a dream. It felt real. It felt like mine. That night, I wrote one short sentence in my notebook. Today, I didn't just see London. I felt it.
Part 5. The First Job. A week passed quickly. Each day I explored new streets, tried different foods, and listened to people talk. But I knew I couldn't just walk around forever. I needed a job. My savings were getting smaller, and London was expensive. Every night I searched online for part-time jobs. Barista needed, waiter wanted, kitchen assistant, flexible hours. I sent emails, but no one replied. The silence felt heavy, but I kept trying. One afternoon, while walking near the train station, I saw a small sign in a cafe window. It said, "Help wanted, part-time barista." I stopped and smiled. Maybe this was my chance.
I walked inside. The smell of coffee and baked bread filled the air. Behind the counter stood a tall man with short hair and a friendly smile. "Good afternoon," I said. "I saw the sign outside. Are you still looking for someone?" He looked at me for a moment and said, "Yeah, we are. Got any experience?" "A little," I answered honestly. "I helped in a cafe back home." He nodded and crossed his arms. "All right then. Can you start tomorrow?" My eyes widened. "Tomorrow?" I asked, surprised. He laughed. "Yeah, why not? Everyone starts somewhere." That night, I couldn't sleep. I was nervous but excited. I kept practicing in front of the mirror. "Good morning, what would you like to drink?" "One cappuccino coming right up." I wanted to sound natural, confident, and friendly.
The next morning, I arrived 10 minutes early. The cafe was already busy. People ordering, talking, typing on laptops. The smell of coffee made everything feel warm and alive. The manager, whose name was Tom, gave me an apron and said, "Welcome to the team, Adam." At first, everything was confusing. There were too many buttons, too many drinks, too many names to remember. Tom showed me how to make espresso, how to steam milk, and how to clean the coffee machine.
I tried to follow, but sometimes I pressed the wrong button or mixed up the orders. One customer said, "Excuse me, I asked for a latte, not a cappuccino." I froze for a second, then said quickly, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Tom smiled and whispered, "Don't worry, mate, happens to everyone." I laughed nervously and made a new drink.
By the afternoon, I was sweating, my hands covered in coffee stains, but I was starting to understand how things worked. The rhythm of the cafe had its own music. The sound of milk frothing, spoons clinking, cups sliding across the counter, and people saying cheers as they left. During a short break, I sat outside with Tom. He offered me a sandwich and said, "You did well today. Most new people panic on their first shift." I smiled, still catching my breath. "Thank you. I was really nervous." He nodded. "Nervous is good. It means you care." When my shift ended, I felt exhausted, but proud. My hands smelled like coffee, my clothes smelled like milk and sugar, but my heart felt light. I had survived my first day at work in London. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "I made mistakes today, but I learned more than I expected. Confidence is built one coffee at a time." As I lay in bed, I replayed the day in my head. The smiles, the mistakes, the laughter, and the sound of the coffee machine still echoing in my mind. Somehow, even though I was far from home, for the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be.